The ground beneath Pecos, Texas moved again tonight. Not with the violence of Venezuela, not with the warning of Yellowstone. Just a quiet, low-magnitude tremor, the kind that most Texans in the area have grown so accustomed to feeling that they barely register it anymore. A jolt, a rattle, and then nothing. Life continues. The oil wells continue pumping. The wastewater disposal wells continue injecting. And somewhere in the Permian Basin, another fault that was stable for millions of years before 2009 absorbs another increment of pressure it was never designed to hold. The ground beneath West Texas has been shaking like this for 17 years. And the reason it has been shaking, the reason an area that was historically almost completely seismically quiet now produces thousands of earthquakes per year, is not geology. It is not tectonic forces. It is not a natural process happening on geological timescales that humans cannot control. It is a decision. A daily, ongoing, commercially motivated decision to inject approximately 15 million barrels of toxic wastewater into the ground beneath the Permian Basin every single day. Since 2009, the oil and gas industry has injected approximately 50 billion barrels of produced wastewater, the briny, chemically contaminated fluid that rises to the surface with every barrel of oil extracted from West Texas shale, into deep underground formations across the Permian Basin. 50 billion barrels. Every barrel of oil produced in the Permian brings with it 3 to 5 barrels of this water. At current production levels, the Permian accounts for more than 40% of all oil produced in the United States. The math on the water is inescapable. More oil means more water means more injection, and more injection means more earthquakes. USGS and TexNet researchers have identified 45,009 earthquakes in the Permian Basin linked to this activity since 2009. More than 4,000 of them at magnitude 3.0 or above, 10 at magnitude 5.0 or above. A region that recorded almost no earthquakes before the fracking boom is now one of the most seismically active areas in the continental United States, and almost none of the seismicity is natural. To understand how injecting water underground creates earthquakes, you need to understand what faults actually are and what keeps them stable. Faults are fractures in the Earth's crust, planes of weakness where two blocks of rock are in contact, held together by friction. The friction that prevents a fault from slipping is partly a function of the pressure pressing the two sides together, and partly a function of the pore pressure, the pressure of the fluid already in the rock. When you inject large volumes of fluid into a formation under pressure, you increase the pore pressure in the surrounding rock. That increased pore pressure acts like a lubricant on the fault surfaces it reaches. It reduces the effective friction holding the fault together. And when the friction drops below the level needed to resist the tectonic stress already present in the rock, stress that has been accumulating for millions of years along ancient basement faults that nobody mapped because they never produced earthquakes, the fault slips. That slip is an earthquake. And in the Permian Basin, it has been happening over and over again on faults that no one knew existed before they started moving. Stanford geophysicist Bill Ellsworth, who co-directs the Stanford Center for Induced and Triggered Seismicity, described the situation with a precision that the industry's own communications have never matched. As long as wastewater disposal continues, these faults are likely to continue to slip and make the occasional earthquake. That word occasional is doing significant work in that sentence. The USGS catalog for the Permian Basin does not describe occasional earthquakes. It describes 45,009 detected events, a number so large that researchers had to develop template-matching algorithms just to process the data. And that catalog only goes back to the point where monitoring was good enough to detect small events. What happened between 2009 and 2017, before the Texas Seismological Network was operational, was characterized using a 10-station array designed for a different purpose. And even with that limited coverage, researchers identified patterns of seismicity that correspond precisely to the locations and timelines of wastewater injection operations. The largest induced earthquakes in the Permian Basin have reached magnitude 5.4, releasing more than 30 times the energy of a magnitude 4.0. AAPG research published in December 2024 noted that induced seismicity has occurred as far as 40 kilometers from deep injection wells. The earthquake doesn't happen directly under the well that caused it. It happens on a connected fault elsewhere, one the operator may not have mapped, on infrastructure another operator owns. The well that triggers the earthquake may not even be under the same regulatory jurisdiction as what it damages. Stop for a moment. The oil industry injects 15 million barrels of wastewater per day into the ground beneath West Texas. The USGS has confirmed that this injection is causing thousands of earthquakes per year on basement faults that pre-exist the injection by millions of years. The largest of these earthquakes reach magnitudes capable of damaging surface infrastructure. And the location where the earthquake actually occurs may be 40 kilometers from the well that caused it, meaning operators cannot identify in advance which faults are at risk or guarantee that their operations are not loading the fault that ruptures next week. Midland, Texas and Odessa, Texas, twin cities in the heart of the Permian Basin's Midland subbasin, have a combined metropolitan population of approximately 700,000 people. They sit in one of the most seismically active induced earthquake zones in the United States. Their building stock was not designed with earthquake resistance in mind because for the entirety of human habitation in the region, the ground did not move. The Permian Basin was seismically quiet for as long as anyone had been keeping records. The infrastructure that serves those 700,000 people, water treatment, electricity, hospitals, schools, was built to the standards of a region where earthquakes simply did not happen. They happen now, every day. And the question that seismologists are increasingly urgent about is not whether the current rate of induced seismicity will continue. It is whether the pressure that is accumulated in the subsurface over 17 years of continuous injection will eventually activate a fault capable of producing an earthquake larger than anything the induced seismicity record has yet produced. The University of Texas at Austin's Center for Injection and Seismicity Research has identified 7 distinct induced earthquake systems in the Permian Basin, each with unique geological characteristics, injection depths, and fault geometry. In the most dangerous systems, injection targets depths that directly interface with basement-rooted faults, large, ancient structures stressed by tectonic forces for millions of years and not well characterized before injection begins. Pore pressure increases from 17 years of continuous injection, measured at up to 500 pounds per square inch in many areas, a 10 to 20% increase over native rock pressure, are being absorbed by faults already carrying geological stress. The Texas Railroad Commission, the state regulatory body overseeing oil and gas operations, has taken steps to reduce deep injection rates in response to the seismicity crisis. Beginning in late 2021, operators were required to reduce injection volumes into deep formations in the most affected areas. Researchers confirmed this corresponded to a reduction in earthquake rates, itself proof that the seismicity was induced. Reducing injection reduces earthquakes. Increasing injection increases them. But the Railroad Commission has not required operators to demonstrate, before commencing deep injection at a new site, that the target formation does not connect to a basement fault capable of a magnitude 5 or larger earthquake. It has not established mandatory seismic monitoring for all active disposal wells, and it has not publicly modeled the maximum credible earthquake the current Permian subsurface pressure state could produce, a number that researchers at multiple institutions describe as unknown because the deep fault inventory remains incompletely characterized. Bill Ellsworth's statement bears repeating. As long as wastewater disposal continues, these faults are likely to continue to slip. The Permian Basin is not approaching its production peak. Researchers at UT Austin expect production to continue at roughly current levels into the foreseeable future. 15 million barrels of produced water per day, every day, into formations that have already absorbed 50 billion barrels since 2009, onto faults that were quiet for millions of years before humans pressurized the rock above them. The industry calls the current situation manageable. The seismologists who study it call it a grand geomechanical experiment. The difference between those two descriptions is not rhetorical. It is the difference between a regulatory framework built on the assumption that the system is understood and a scientific consensus that the system contains unknown variables that could produce outcomes beyond anything yet observed. The ground beneath Pecos, Texas moved again tonight. It will move again tomorrow. And the pressure that is causing it to move is not declining. It is accumulating. Subscribe to Seismic Alert. We will keep watching what builds beneath the basin.